Today we're finally going to check out the speakers in my home theater. These are the RBH 661 SWRs. Now this is a fairly compact speaker measuring 7.7 inches in width. It's 22.5 inches in height and it's only 5 inches deep, so this is going to take up minimal space on your wall. This is in an MTM configuration, meaning it's got two woofers and in the center it's got a tweeter. It's got two 6.5-inch aluminum cone woofers with an aluminum phase plug dead center. And then in the center of the speaker, we've got a 1-inch AMT tweeter. It's also got a frequency response down from 50 Hertz all the way up to 40K. So this should give you some really crispy detail. This does have a 91 dB sensitivity and this is a 6 ohm speaker. It also weighs 21 pounds. So this is not a lightweight speaker, and it's also got really good build quality. It's made out of HDF and not the cheaper MDF. So let's go ahead and play some demos in the theater. As far as setup, I've got all 18 speakers hooked up to a Trinnov Altitude processor powered by Trinnov amps. I'll also be playing back demos using a Kaleidescape. Since I'm only reviewing the speakers themselves, I've decided to run them all full range without the help of any subwoofers. This way, I can see how capable they are on their own without the help of the subwoofers. And yes, I know most folks, including myself, would be crossing these over to subwoofers, but I'm only here to check out the speakers themselves. I've got 3 speakers behind my screen, 2 wide channels, 1 set of surrounds for the first row, and a second set of surrounds for the second row. And in the back of the room, I've got left, center, right surround rear speakers, which makes 12 bed layer channels. I'm also using 6 top channels for front, middle, and rear. The first demo we're going to check out is Gravity. It's got a Dolby Atmos mix with excellent surround panning through every speaker. What we're going to listen for is how well the voices track as they move around the room.
Even for your pretty blue eyes.
Well, my eyes are brown.
Right now your eyes are bloodshot.
Okay, before we go any further, I'm sure you heard that strange fluttering noise. And that is actually coming from the speakers themselves. Now this is my first time dealing with speakers that use a phase plug, and since the speakers are sealed and I'm running everything full range, the pressure's gotta go somewhere, so it's shooting out of the phase plug and making that fluttering sound. So rather than going full range, I found that 57 Hertz was the lowest point that I could set the crossover to before they started making some noise. So from here on out, all speakers are going to be crossed over at 57 Hertz, still without the help of any subwoofers. Now let's go back and play the same clip over, except crossed over at 57 Hertz.
Oh, nothing, Matt. It's just a new set of eyes to scan the edge of the universe.
It's designed for hospital use, but this one's a prototype. Stand by for life.
Listen, they don't bankroll prototypes. Even for your pretty blue eyes.
Well, my eyes are brown.
Right now your eyes are bloodshot.
Well, that's a pretty big difference setting the crossover to limit the amount of bass extension. Given the size, they obviously were never going to handle full bandwidth. Of course, you'd want to spend some time getting the correct crossover set so that you get a seamless pairing with your subwoofers. And it'll also keep your smaller speakers from self-destructing by feeding them too much bass.
Am I a go to assist Dr. Stone in removing the panel?
Assistance appreciated.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Houston. Mind if I join the fun?
Certainly.
How you feeling?
Like a chihuahua that's being tumble-dried.
It should be no surprise that since all 18 speakers are exactly the same, that every voice, whether it's George Clooney's, Ed Harris's, or Sandra Bullock's, they all have the exact timbre whether the dialogue is coming from the front speakers or the top left rear speaker. Having the exact same speakers in every location will give you that perfect bubble of immersiveness that we're all striving for in our home theaters. Now, all the characters' voices in that little clip sounded relatively thin since we're hearing their voices come from the helmet's radio, so let's throw on The Rise of Skywalker and hear what vocals sound like with a bit more weight and presence.
You will rule all the galaxy as the new Emperor. But beware, she is not who you think she is.
Who is she?
In that demo, I isolated only the center channel, so that's all that was playing. And it might be hard to tell in this video, but Palpatine has got a seriously manly, chesty voice. And this little RBH speaker can definitely do it justice. It doesn't dig as deep as, say, something like a Perlison S7C, since it is so small, but it does sound a lot bigger than its size. There's no weird sounds coming from it from the phase plug, and the tweeter never got harsh or broke up. And I was playing this at a way louder level than I could stand for an entire movie. It also had no problems hitting the second row of seats, keeping vocal intelligibility clean and uncompressed. So whether it was playing at high SPLs or low SPL, it maintained clarity at all levels, even with those hard-to-hear Christopher Nolan films.
We live in a twilight world. We live in a twilight world.
And there are no friends at dusk.
You've been made. The siege is a blind for them to vanish you.
Next up, we're going to pop on Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Every car in this movie sounds like it's got a V8 turbocharged engine in it. So when a car drives from front down to the side of the back wall, you want to feel that engine rumble across your room. I think that Palpatine's voice from the previous demo proved that the 661s can produce some bass. And when the cars are driving down the side of my wall, I could legit feel the deep vibrations travel through each channel. And keep in mind, this is without a subwoofer, so don't skimp on your surround speakers. Let's move on to A Quiet Place Part 2 for its excellent atmospheric mix. As we can see from the Trinnov Atmos Object Viewer, the yellow balls that are moving throughout the room represent the effects. There's wind swirling throughout the room and the crickets and other effects that blanket the entire space with sound. And those AMT tweeters have really great top-end transparency that kind of reminds me of an electrostat, in that there's a delicacy and a crispness that doesn't come across too sharp, but bright enough to make the subtleties float in the air, the same way that an electrostat does, minus the narrow dispersion of an electrostat. In my space, and with the amount of speakers in here, I've got no dead spots and no gaps between channel pans, so there's a very cohesive soundstage whether you're in the first row or the second row. Obviously, this demo has no bass in it, but the three-dimensionality of how these speakers create that speaker disappearing effect is amazing. There's clear definition between each little sound effect that makes the localization easy to pinpoint without ever smearing sounds together or sounding muddy. And by the way, if you have the space, don't listen to all the talk about all you need is 5.1.4 or 7.1.4. Fit as many speakers as you can, provided that you have the space and the spare change. Because filling in the spaces between speakers makes a huge difference for channel-to-channel movement. If you can go beyond 16 channels, the immersion factor is so good. And of course, get matching speakers for that perfect blend of sound. These RBHs would be a pretty good option. Keep in mind that this is my experience with these speakers in my room. If your space is smaller than mine or bigger than mine, they may perform differently. It's also my subjective take on these speakers. Now this is an on-axis measurement at 1 meter. You can see that it's relatively flat and starts dropping off at about 80 Hertz. Since the speakers will be on a wall, you will get a bit more bass with boundary gain. At the time of this video, the RBH 661 SWR is selling for $1,500 each. My home theater sounded amazing with the previous speakers I had in here before, but now, having spent a couple months dialing in the speakers with subwoofers, it truly has taken another step upwards. Now, as mentioned earlier, you cannot run these full range without them sounding like they're gonna explode, so you're gonna have to limit the bass response. You got some folks out there that don't think there's any meaningful bass in any of the surround channels and that it doesn't make sense to have surrounds that are bass capable. Well, those folks are wrong and they probably have hearing problems. The 661s, while they don't have a tremendous amount of bass given the size of the enclosure, they definitely have more punch than the previous 2 or 3 home theater setups that I've had in here before. And I'm talking about the on-wall setups. I'd say the B&W speakers still have the most robust bottom end of all the on-wall speakers that I've tried, but they were way bigger speakers. The tweeters on the RBHs though, they take the win. I can still get a pretty nice kick when a plane or a gunshot comes from any one of the surround speakers, so I do like the fact that these speakers aren't just big satellite speakers without any balls. These have got some pretty nice soft balls. They're not super big and they're not exactly small, so if you're in a somewhat narrow room and you want to still have space to walk around, the 661s can lay really close to your walls, so you can have them either flush mounted or you can put them on brackets. And that was a really important factor for me. I didn't want to have speakers that people would bump into and knock off the walls or have speakers on stands. And these speakers, I think, look really cool and fit in with the aesthetic of my room. Having ample bass, a smooth, robust mid-range, a transparently detailed top end with the best in the business build quality leaves me kinda baffled. Why has there only been one channel on YouTube that's been a longtime supporter of RBH? Now that I've heard the brand, there's gonna be 2 channels that support the brand. Well, 3 if you count Dream Media, which by the way, does carry all the RBH models. So if you do wanna pick up these speakers or anything else, I'll leave links down below in this video's description. I think you are doing yourself a disservice by not considering RBH for your next speaker purchase. They do sound that good, and I do highly recommend them. Well, thanks for watching. Comment if you've heard RBH, and let me know if you like them. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.